Hello everyone, this is Arthur, or E.G. Arthur if you prefer, and this video is about a new use case for the GenOut plugin. GenOut is a fork of an earlier plugin called LOTRO by Garen, and GenOut is short for generic outputter. It's a generic mechanism for outputting text and or graphics with a lot of customizability and ability to customize and tweak and personalize how you want the output. But one of the features I've added to Alerter is the ability to import what I call use cases, which are just like canned alert configurations. And this one is about the Treasure Bugan event. So for those who are not familiar with the Treasure Bugan event, a Bugan is sort of something between a goblin and a hobbit, but this particular Bugan is a thief of treasure, and your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to spawn the Bugan in one of a various number of instances. Once it spawns, then you have a timer within which you have to defeat the Bugan in order to recover the treasure. So that's the basic premise. The challenge is, especially for melee characters, the Bugan moves around quite quickly, and he bobs and he weaves and he dodges. I mean, I'm using dodge figuratively. He just kind of moves in certain directions, and it can be hard to land hits on him. Again, a range character probably doesn't have much of an issue and may not be interested in this use case. But if you're a melee character, you're likely to have some issues trying to whack this little buggin. So one of the techniques that's useful for a melee character is to put the Bugan on follow. And that way you will always be behind or moving towards the Bugan. And if the Bugan turns, then you turn. And so you can focus more on your melee skills instead of having to manage that and a whole bunch of movement commands as well. So the person that raised my awareness of that was Elda on her stream last week, mentioned it. So thank you, Elda. But I think it's a fairly well-known technique among the community. So then the challenge is, how do you issue that follow command? I mean, the simplistic way is after the Bugan spawns, you target the Bugan, and then you literally type /follow. Well, some people are slow typists, some people are inaccurate typists, in which case they might misspell it, and they have to back up, fix it, redo it, etc. That's all represents lost time. And if you're poorly geared, or you're not very good at the class, or for whatever reason, it may make the difference between failing to defeat the Bugan or succeeding at defeating the Bugan. So the purpose of all of this is to try and speed up and make as foolproof as possible the issuing of the follow command, assuming that you've already targeted the Bugan. Here is kind of the baseline where I have a poorly geared burglar in the Chamber of Shadows. I'm moving forward, and then there's that wonderful feature, it's a feature, not a bug apparently, of the ginormous lag spike when the Bugan spawns. So I target the Bugan, and I don't know if you caught it there in my keystrokes, but I literally type /follow. Now I'm following the Bugan, and I can just spam my melee skills and take down the Bugan. This Bugan has less than 800k morale, so it's not that difficult. But in other instances, as we'll see shortly, it has much more morale, at least more than twice as much morale. So that's a little bit more iffy if your gear is terrible or you don't know the class very well or so on and so forth. So that's kind of the dumb, simplistic way to do the follow. Now let's look at some other options. Here I am in Bree, and my first improvement there is to slam a shortcut into one of the slots in one of my docked quick slots. In this case, I picked location 24, which is in the lower right-hand corner of my docked quick slots. And by putting it there, I now have a icon that I can click, and whenever I click it, I follow whatever I have targeted. You see, I just followed Wenda Cranespill, who doesn't move, but just to demonstrate that the follow command is working. Now, there's two ways that I can invoke this. One way is to navigate over to that little icon and click it, which is a little bit error-prone because it's in the midst of a bunch of other icons, so there's a good possibility of a misclick. In fact, I might actually glug a potion if I'm not careful. So that's not ideal. Another way is a multiple keystroke or a multiple key press combination. That particular position corresponds to control equals the position 24. So if I want to use just a single key press, what I could do is I could give up one of my hotkeys temporarily and put the icon in my hotkey bar. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a shortcut to position 12, replacing touch and go, my touch and go skill. And now I can use just the equal sign in order to do the follow. As you can see, I'm following Wenda Cranespill again. Right. Another option, which might be even more attractive, is to take one of your undocked quick slots, if you have one available, and I'm going to use quick slot 4. So I'm going into my options, quick slots, and I'm going to make bar 4 visible. Actually, I already had it visible. Let's pretend that it wasn't. So I make it visible. Now I go into reposition UI, the reposition UI interface, and now I need to find where that undocked quick slot is, and that can be a challenge sometimes. Although if you look closely, there's a special icon which is used for swiveling it or pivoting it between horizontal and vertical, and it's in the upper center part of my screen. So I just needed to look for that icon, and there it is. So now I'm going to move my quick slot 4 around, and I'm going to move my alias there into the middle of that quick slot. Then I can go into UI settings and change the scale of my quick slot so then it's a nice big square right in the center of my screen. You know, and I immediately realized that it's kind of awkward to have it directly in the center of the screen, because then it actually covers up my character. So that's just kind of, that just doesn't feel right. So I'll move it off a little to the left. You see, it's still functioning as a follow. Right, so now let's do it with a plugin. And first off, I'm not going to use my own plugin. I'm going to use Thurlore's Sequence Bars plugin. So bring that up. I'm creating a new bar and repositioning that by dragging the caption, not the icon, but the caption. I'll increase the scale under the global options. Now I'm going to edit the sequence, slot number 1, chat command, and the chat that I'm going to use is /follow, or the alias I'm going to do. Now I'm going to change the default. Just as an aside here, I think it's kind of ironic that in sequence bars, the default icon appearance is not default. In other words, if you want a default, quote-unquote, default icon appearance, you have to change it from the default appearance of the icon. Just a little bit of irony there. So I'm changing it to default so that it looks like the other one, that it actually has the text of the alias there. And you see it's functioning as... It's a slightly bigger icon. It's more customizable in terms of color and so forth in animation. You can change the caption there. I could change that to Bugan perhaps, or just follow. It's up to you. I think you can hide the caption too, but I'm not going to bother. So that's another option if you want a larger icon. All right, but let's go to the plugin that I really want to show here, which is my plugin. Bring up the setup utility, and now I'm going to do an import. Go to the plugins directory. From there, Igarther plugins, GenOut, imports, Treasure Bugan, and there's a text file there. Open that up, copy the text, go back to the game, go to the import tab, paste it, save it. All right, so now we have the alert. Let's take a look at it real briefly. The trigger tab of the alert shows that it's listening on the Quest and the user chat 1 channels. I always enable user chat 1 so that you can test these alerts even if you can't get the real message text that you need for the trigger. So for instance, as I record this, the Treasure Bugan event is over, but I can simulate those messages by sending text to myself via the user chat 1 channel. I will give a huge caveat to that though. If you send the same message repeatedly over and over and over to a chat channel, even if you're only sending it to yourself, you can trigger an auto-gag process that SSG has in place to combat spammers. And in fact, in the course of testing this Treasure Bugan use case, I did get myself gagged. In fact, one of my characters was gagged for more than 24 hours, and I had to submit a ticket and yada, yada, yada. So just be careful. If you send the same message over and over at above a certain frequency or message rate, you may end up getting gagged and you have to jump through hoops in order to get ungagged again. And sometimes those gags are account-wide. Other times it seems like they only apply to the character that actually triggered the gag process. So the pattern that it's looking for, this use case, is that text you see there, new quest : the Treasure Bugan. Now, the unfortunate reality is that text is a subset of the text that you get from the auto-bestowed quest for the Treasure Bugan event. So this does fire when you don't want it to. Most likely, it'll fire when the Treasure Bugan event starts. Unfortunately, I can't tweak it or fine-tune it right now with any confidence because the Treasure Bugan event is over. But once it starts up again, I'll try to tweak it so that it only fires when you're actually spawning the Bugan rather than just when you get the auto-bestowed quest. But for now, there's a false positive condition. So moving over to the response tab, the duration and the interval are set to 60. Now there is a quirk of the original alerter code in that whatever you set for the duration, it appears to only last half that amount of time. So I need to look into that and hopefully fix it. So really think of that as a 30-second duration. And the interval being the same as the duration means that it doesn't flash. If you wanted the graphic to flash, then you could reduce that interval. The lower that you go, the more quickly it'll flash, unless you get all the way to 0, and 0 has the special meaning of don't flash at all. As for the other parameters, the size and the position of the output area are defined there. You can also see the candy-striped rectangle that's in the upper right-hand corner, which shows where the output is going. But that can be changed, that can be moved around, stretched out. It's really customizable. For that matter, if you want to come up with a different image, if you want to use a different image, let's say a screenshot or something like that, a picture of your cat, whatever, you could change the contents of the image field. That field contains a relative path name to an image file. The image file needs to be either in .tga format or .jpeg. And it's a relative path name relative to the resources subdirectory of the GenOut plugin directory. But really, the most important part, or one of the most unique parts of this alert, is that there's a quick slot that's set for the output, so that when you click the graphic, you execute the follow command. And the way that's done is I dragged and dropped an alias icon onto the square that's in the configuration panel, and then that set the quick slot to be that alias. I also set mask, the mask option, only to discover later when I was debugging something that when an alias is used as the quick slot, essentially mask is turned on by default. So that's kind of a redundant setting. Just something to keep in mind if you ever set an alias as a quick slot in GenOut or Alerter, then implicitly it also sets the mask. And what the mask says is that the entire output area is clickable. Otherwise, for instance, if you had an item there or an emote or a skill, there would be a little icon in the middle of the output area, and it would only work if you clicked in the middle. All right, so let's give it a whirl here. Don't forget the feather. This instance, by the way, for those who don't recognize it, is Sword Halls, which is generally the best one for a Treasure Bugan because it requires no combat until the Bugan is spawned. So it's really quick to get a spawn and to do the Bugan quest. All right, so move forward here. Wait for the lag spike, and there it is. See, it automatically triggered, put up a picture of a Bugan. I targeted the Bugan, clicked the graphic, and it issued the follow command. You see, this Bugan has more than twice as much morale as the one in the Chamber of Shadows. I have actually failed to kill this Bugan on some of my characters, either because they're tank spec'd or they're just very poorly geared. So every second counts. And there we go. So just to recap, if you load the use case from the import file into GenOut, then you have a working Treasure Bugan alert. At the point that you spawn the Bugan, the text that comes up will trigger that graphic to appear in whichever part of the screen that you have designated. And so then target the Bugan, click the graphic, and it will issue a follow. I mean, it's really a fairly simple use case, but hopefully folks will find it useful, and I expect to be adding more use cases in the future as I encounter things that are amenable to using GenOut as a mechanism for triggering and or outputting customizable text and or graphics. So thank you for watching the video, and I'm looking forward to perhaps putting some use cases out there for the Farmers Fair, which is the next festival that's coming up.